When you look at the AAMC data or individual school data, they are not telling you your chances.
Right.
They are telling you, hello, mapped Facebook group. Here for another Ask the Dean with our former Dean of Coolness and Director of Admissions, Dr. Scott Wright, and our amazing Rachel Grubbs.
Woohoo.
How are you all today?
Doing well.
Me too.
Amazing.
Also well.
How's everything in Boulder, Colorado?
Oh, everything's bolder and bolder. We are hanging out doing well. So I'm just excited for the new artwork that you can see if you're watching this on Facebook Live or on YouTube later. We have some fun sound panels with a little bit of artwork on there. Work hard, be creative, do good. Scott, you want to talk about those real quick? It's not something we've really talked a ton about, our values here at Mapped that we think are important for us and for students.
Absolutely. I think that what we try to do is mirror student values. That you students, you guys are working really hard to make your dreams come true, and you guys are working hard in classes, particularly now in the COVID virtual environment where you're having to do things that you've never done before. That's really a challenge, as well as finding volunteer opportunities and the things that you do on a daily basis to try to make all this happen for yourself. So you're working hard, and we want to mirror that in terms of what we do with Mapped, and so we're working hard to make your hard work pay off. Creativity is key. You guys, as a rule, you guys are super creative. You put together study groups. You do tutoring. You put together clubs and organizations, and you find lots of opportunities to impact the community, and you're real creative in that in what you do within the context of your hard work. And so, obviously, at Mapped, we are trying to be very creative in terms of the platform we're creating to really make all this happen for you, and putting your creativity and hard work together with ours. I think it'll be great, and obviously the great end of all of this is doing good in the world, is doing good in our communities, and doing good in the world around us, whether that means impacting other students through helping them in study groups or tutoring, whether that means obviously as a physician, you are going to be doing good in your community through helping patients, but not only individual patients, but also those who in a community atmosphere. We're seeing a great deal of interest in the current environment with the pandemic on public health and what community health is all about, and you guys are going to impact that in important ways. So it's on an individual basis, you're doing good, and on a community-wide basis, you're going to be doing good. And so I think our values are to do good by you as well, both through content that we provide, as well as through Mapped as a platform that is going to help you track your way through this process. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I like them. Rachel, anything to add to those?
I think what's to me is kind of interesting is when we first started talking about be creative, sometimes I get a little stuck in be creative thinking it means something artistic. And I love the way Scott explained it, that it's more about being resourceful. Mm-hmm. So as you guys, as you pre-med students who are listening and watching are thinking about our three values, work hard, be creative, do good. Like Scott said, those are values that we think we have and that we think you have. And that's sort of why it's the match. But creative in the sense of always looking for solutions, as opposed to the kind of sometimes narrower definition of paintbrush to canvas, which is certainly a form of being creative, but yes. It's only one form of many, many options of that definition.
Yeah, that's definitely not the creative that I am good at. I am much more there's a problem here and there's got to be a better way to solve it. And so that's literally where Mapped came from.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm excited. We get to hopefully play with Mapped this week, a kind of a shell function
Yeah.
of an application. So we're
Time to get our hands dirty. I love it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, as we kind of get started here, taking questions from the group, I know there's one from last week. Last week we were apparently really efficient. We got to all but just one or two questions. And one of the questions we didn't get to last week has been asked again. So that might be a great place to start. And then, as always, guys, I'll probably hop off camera just so you can look at more of the beautiful face of Drs. Gray and Dr. Wright. But I'll be around.
I wouldn't push that too far.
All right. So, how much of an impact does race play in admissions for medical school? As a current Asian American, sometimes it can get overwhelming when looking at the stats for overall Asians compared to other races and how much higher it is. This is always a fun, interesting one. We talked about age, I think, either last week or the week before, where you're like, yeah, age is it's kind of illegal to ask that. It's actually interesting. Before we kind of jump into that question that just popped up, I had a student reach out to me. I was talking to them, and they were talking about applying to medical school. They're a non-traditional student. They're at a post-bac program that's somewhat affiliated with the medical school, and the admissions person or the advisor at the post-bac program was like, oh, you can now apply to this school. They got rid of their age cutoff. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Whoa.
That's not allowed. So either there's some shady stuff going on at the school, or the advisor's just completely misinformed. I'm hoping it's the latter.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume it's the latter, but I may have to do some research.
And let me just when we're talking about this age thing, there's something very interesting, and I don't want us to lose the question about race. So
yep, we'll get to it.
Be sure and get back to it.
Yep.
Back to that. But interesting about federal law with regard to race and admissions and race and age. And admissions and age related to federal law protects the protections for age are all on the upper end. It is legal to discriminate against students on the lower end.
Yeah.
In other words, we at times will have students who have fast-tracked their way through high school and through college and are applying to medical school. We had one year a 16-year-old
Doogie
Hauser, who was applying to medical school, and we denied him an interview and admission, obviously, based on the fact that he was too young to even participate in the anatomy lab. He was too young to participate in the clinical environment. There was a lot of issues related to that, and all of the legal counsels that we sought advice from were that the federal anti-discrimination laws with regard to age are all about the upper end. Yep. That the lower end, there are some limits to what students, schools can do.
Yeah.
On age. But with regard to race, I mean, this is a great, obviously last week when we talked a little bit about race, it depends on the state, it depends on the school, it depends on whether or not it's a private school or public school in terms of how they're going to deal with race in their admissions process. What is clear is that most schools want a diverse class. Well, I would say all schools, all medical schools want a diverse medical school class. There's tons of research that shows that advantages individuals within the class as well as the class as a whole. It obviously advantages the clinical environment to have a diversity of people in the class that are serving patients in the hospitals where they participate, et cetera. So I think race is an important quality in terms of that diversity factor. And diversity reaches a lot of different things, not just race, but age and life experience and socioeconomic status and a variety of other things that really go into this idea of diversity. Race being one of them. There are schools in states where that has been eliminated or are severely limited in terms of what public institutions can do. with regard to considering race. Some schools cannot use it at all and essentially have a race blind process. Other schools have a much different sort of view of that and have abilities, particularly private schools, where they can do things. And the accreditation of schools is really both from a higher education regional status of accreditation, but also the American medical school accrediting bodies, the LCME and others, are really interested in this idea of diversity and making sure that the classes represent everyone within the community of those seeking to enter. So to address the issue of this particular student, yes, Asian Americans are not considered underrepresented minorities with regard to admission to medical school. Medical schools really are looking for a variety of people. But what I would encourage this particular student to do is to not concentrate too much on comparing themselves within statistics of race to say, well, my race, it looks like the standards are higher because of X, Y, and Z or whatever. That's a dead end in terms of how I feel about what a student needs to do. As an applicant to medical school, you have to make yourself the best applicant you can be, whether you're Asian American or white or you're African American or Hispanic or wherever you're coming from in terms of race or ethnicity. You want to make yourself the best candidate that you can be with regard to everything that you're bringing to the table. And don't get too concentrated on looking at, well, this statistic says this or that statistic says that about my particular group. You have to just kind of open it up and say, I'm going to do the best I can and be the best candidate I can, and then let the chips kind of fall where they're going to fall. The medical schools are not looking at you as an Asian American and comparing you to other Asian Americans and saying, where does this student stand? It's not how it works.
Yeah.
They're looking at you as an individual. What is this person bringing to the table in terms of their application? And there is some level of comparison with the general pool of applicants to say, why would we choose this person over these other 10 or these other 20 or whatever? But they're looking at you as an individual to say, does this person fit our mission? Does this person seem to fit what we want to see in our medical school as individuals to add to what we have? And so I think it's important to consider or to not really look too deeply into those types of statistics to say, well, and I don't even know, I've never seen a school that publishes statistics based on race. In other words, well, if you're Asian American, here was your average MCAT score or average GPA. I mean, typically they just say the average for the class is this, or the average GPA is that. Now, maybe there are sources, maybe there are schools that publish that kind of thing based on race and ethnicity, but that would really surprise me and be kind of odd in my
The AAMC provides that for
the aggregate of all applicants,
yeah,
right?
For the aggregate,
correct,
not school specific.
Right.
I think one of the things that you pointed out that I try to hammer home all the time for students is that when you look at the AAMC data or individual school data, they are not telling you your chances.
Right.
They are telling you historically, this is what has happened. And what you cannot do from that data is then go, okay, I know that as an Asian American, my chances of getting in are 64%.
Right.
Based on historical data. You can't do that because you don't know the stories behind all of those numbers. You don't know the Asian Americans who didn't get in, what their applications look like. Did they not get in because they're Asian American, or did they not get in because they had a 490 on their MCAT? You don't know. Right. And so looking at that information it's fun and it's interesting, but it's not useful. right? I don't think it's useful at all to look at that historical data and go,
Yeah.
oh, right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
Agreed.
kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's switch it a little bit and go, because this comes up all the time. The answer, the question for affirmative action, right? The Supreme Court has continued to uphold that affirmative action is okay, and so it's up to each state to determine whether or not they want to use it, up to each school, etc. Let's say that the question always comes: why don't schools just pick the best applicants? Right? If the top 1,000 students are all Asian Americans, are all white, why bother accepting an African American student with lower stats?
So this is a very good question, and I think what it boils down to is, how do you define best, and how do you define qualified? And if we are going to say, well, to be qualified, you have to have X GPA and X MCAT score, then let's just let a computer do it all, and we can all go home and
put
sleep
our feet
well
up and sip on
yeah.
our martinis.
Yeah, I mean, we can just trash the whole rest of the process. We don't have to. We can write an algorithm to do that. But that's not what it's all about. It's not about finding the most qualified student simply in terms of the metrics.
Yep.
It's really about finding the best student in terms of overall picture. And it also goes back to what I just mentioned about having a variety of people in the class benefits everyone in the class. And that is important. And that has been held so often by educational studies that really look into what is the value of a diversity, of a diverse class. And I'm not talking about simply race and ethnicity. I'm talking about just a great variety of things with regard to diversity.
Everything. Rural versus urban versus whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The experiences, how you problem solve, how
absolutely
all of that stuff. The diversity of thought is so important.
Absolutely. And so, I think it really is important to understand that the word qualified or the word best is not it's not a word that simply means numbers. That it's about qualification on interpersonal qualities, on intrapersonal qualities. That the AAMC in particular has really enunciated very clearly what are these core competencies that we're looking for that make a good medical student and ultimately make a good physician.
Yep.
And this is what we're looking for with regard to qualification. So I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think the way to look at it, where a lot of students think about it, is, okay, so 528, that's obviously the best, and you want all of those students. But again, it's good enough academically, right? Good enough that we have determined is good enough to get through our medical school, to get through our curriculum. And so when you look at 528 is good enough, 520 is good enough, 515 is good enough, 510 is good enough, 505 is good enough, 500, we've kind of seen some issues with a few students around here. 498, probably not good enough for us, right? So it's like it's not a spectrum, it's like a tripwire. As soon as you get over that tripwire, you're good enough academically. Let me see your story.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I have seen it's not been unusual in my experience to see students who have a 520 or the equivalent of that in the old MCAT numerical system, who were complete morons. I mean, just to put it, they had no personal skills. They could not. They had no common sense. And
or the opposite, where they're just completely arrogant and they know they're amazing and hot stuff, and look how smart I am at my 520.
Right?
Absolutely. I don't want you either.
No, I don't. There's I've encountered too many physicians out there who have that sort of attitude, and that's not the kind of doctor I want.
Yeah.
And so that's not, that would not be the kind of student I would want in my medical school.
Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
I love those deeper questions.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. What else we got, Rachel?
Oh, wow.
Growing emphasis on burnout from the medical community, at least a lot more than previous years. Do you believe this new awareness will actually result in action toward helping all physicians achieve a work-life balance? Whew, this is my favorite.
I think Ryan should answer that one.
So having gone through the process, right, and it doesn't diminish your thoughts as well, Scott, because you haven't walked the halls of the hospital. So I think there are a few things that come into play. I think work-life balance is a joke, right? And it's weird for me to say that. I don't think it's not a thing. It's work-life balance is just, you have work and you have life and you have family and you have other responsibilities, and you have to figure out how to live with all of it. Mm-hmm. And especially as a physician, the problem is that being a physician never ends. Right? My wife is still a practicing physician. Today's Monday as we're recording this. It's her day to watch the kids because we're in the middle of a pandemic and there is no daycare that we'll send our kids to right now. And so on Mondays, she watches the kids while I hang out with you and do live streams and other fun stuff. Guess what also happens on Mondays? Her clinic is calling her, emailing her, bugging her all day long for all of the stuff that happened over the weekend with her patients. Patients need refills. Patients need this. Patients are they complain a lot and they have lots of stuff going on, and they need you to survive, literally. Yep. That never ends. And so work-life balance, in my mind, it's a fantasy. And the ultimate goal is figuring out how to integrate work into your life, in my mind. That is the best situation. And I think we have so much burnout because we have this focus on work-life balance that nobody is finding. And so they think they're broken and now they're burnt out. Yeah. I'm all about meditation and exercise and eating right and sleeping well. Like, all of that stuff is good stuff. And that will definitely help. But chasing this dream of work-life balance, I think, is part of the problem. And we just need to figure out how to balance the work that we want to do, the income that we want to have, the life and lifestyle that we want to have, and make our life fit with that picture. And I think that's what we get to. The other big issue that I think we have, and hopefully my message over the last 7+ years is helping with this, is that we have too many people in healthcare who became physicians because they wanted a stable job with good pay. And they didn't become physicians to be there for the patient, to deal with all the patient's needs and issues. We had admissions processes 20, 30 years ago where we have physicians now out practicing that really focused on the stats. And, oh, you're smart enough to be a doctor, go ahead, right? Welcome aboard. And so now you're dealing with physicians who have seen healthcare change around them, who have seen reimbursement rates change and decrease dramatically while they're out practicing. And now they're seeing more patients. They have less time. They have less autonomy. And they don't like that. And they're getting burnt out because of that. So if you're going into medicine for the right reason, no matter what happens, no matter how pay is, no matter who your boss is, whatever, right? And there are obviously issues out there. But if you're there to take care of patients, if that is your ultimate driving force, what happens when you close the door is the same. You are there interacting with a patient one-on-one to be there for them. And I think we have too many physicians out there practicing who don't focus on that, who are focused on the paycheck, who are focused on work-life balance, and so they get burnt out and they don't like medicine anymore.
Well, and I think too, just to add to that, Ryan, I think that medical schools do work pretty carefully with students to try to understand what are my goals in life, and what are the fields of medicine that are going to match with that.
Yep.
You know, if I have a goal of having a family and I don't want to be up at 3 a.m. and, you know, going to call or whatever, then there are certain fields of medicine I probably shouldn't consider. And then if I want a structure where I go to work at 8 o'clock and I get off at 5 o'clock or whatever, then there are certain fields that you should probably look at, and others that you shouldn't look at. And I think that there's a really important part of what medical schools do for their students to try to give them an understanding of what that looks like, and where are your personal goals and where are your professional goals, and let's find the match for you that's going to really help you within that mix of things to meet some of the goals that you have. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I do think that there's some effort in that regard to help students make good choices.
Yeah. My concern, I don't want to be the old curmudgeon who's like, med school's hard, that's just the way it is, and that's the way it should always be, right? I'm all for figuring out how to streamline things, how to make things efficient, how to make sure we don't kill students in undergrad and medical school, etc. But I am also realistic and know that medical school is hard, and there's a lot that you have to learn, and there's a lot that you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to work overnight, and you're going to go sleepless for a little while, and you're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. And I think, unfortunately, students, they get to a point where they're like, well, no, I want to be coddled. And unfortunately, it's not the field for you if that's the case. But the other thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it is, and I think as a society, our younger generation is moving toward this already, and that's our fascination with stuff. Right? I think we've had physicians in general, not physicians, but just society in general, have this unrealistic fascination with bigger houses, with lake houses and ski houses and fast cars and slow cars and motorcycles and boats and all of this stuff. And now all of a sudden you're working to maintain your lifestyle, and you get burnt out and jaded because of that, versus right, I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't be able to do what I did leaving the Air Force 5 years ago to go full-time into podcasting if I had all my student loan debt. Right? The Air Force paid for medical school for me. I had flexibility in what I was able to do. I was the person who was able to dictate what I wanted my life to look like because of the lack of loans. And so for students, if you are not handcuffed by having multiple mortgages and multiple car payments and all of the shiny new stuff, you have a lot more flexibility with what you can make your life look like. So just another thing that we don't talk about finances enough in our society, unfortunately.
No, I think you're exactly right. It's this fascination with and obsession with things. And without considering that there's a cost, not only the monetary cost, but there's a cost in terms of how much you got to work and how much you got to work to keep it up. You know, the boat needs cleaning and the boat needs fixing and whatever. So, absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh, how do you talk about your research and research in general for MD, PhD specific essays? How can one tailor our application for these types of programs? So when you were at UT Southwestern, did you guys have an MD, PhD program?
Oh, yeah. Ours was a medical scientist training program, the NIH funded program that was quite well regarded. And the key, I think, for MD, PhD programs is it's one thing to talk about what you did in the lab, you know, as an undergraduate, or what you did on your summer research project or whatever. What these programs are really looking for is, did you have a clear understanding of what you were doing? This is the key. There's a lot of students who participate in research activities who never ever get the big picture. They never, they know the mechanical things that they were doing, but they never really got it in terms of what is this effort all about? What are we doing? How does one connect to the other thing? And what is the big picture of all this? And that's what they're looking for. And so when you talk about your research, particularly when you're applying to MD, PhD programs, you have to go there. You have to really talk about not that I did this, that, and the other thing, but it is what did all this mean in terms of the bigger picture of what the effort of the research project was about, and what did I learn from this with regard to not just the mechanical aspects of research, but what was my mentors, what was the PI's really big thing, and what was this all about? And so you got to go there in those essays, and that's what these MD PhD programs are really looking for, is the students who really understand what it was all about, what they were doing, and not just I was cleaning pipettes and stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's how you talk about it. You go toward a clear enunciation of what you were doing mechanically is fine, but you got to pretty quickly move into the bigger picture of what this was all about.
Yeah. The same thing we talk about all the time for personal statements and extracurricular descriptions is so many students focus on the what, not the so what, right? As you like to talk about.
Yep.
And really, a lot of what happens in a lab could probably be automated at some point in the future. So they're not looking for a body to do stuff. They're looking for minds to think through problems.
Independent researchers,
and they want to make sure, and I talk about this all the time, where students will say, my research isn't in a medical field, and is that okay? I'm like, what kind of research was it? What kind of critical thinking? What were the questions you were asking? They want to make sure that you are an inquisitive person that can that will challenge assumptions and ask the right questions, the hard questions.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. You're right.
I'm always right, Scott.
Oh, no comment.
Will nursing provide enough clinical experience provided I can articulate that well? If not, can you provide examples of other things that can be done? Interesting. So my question would be, is this nursing school or being an actual nurse? Let's assume being an actual nurse. Mm-hmm. So is being a nurse good clinical experience is really the question.
Wow. I mean, I think it is. I think, nurses sometimes get it better than the doctors get it. Frankly, I think that nursing, it depends a little bit on the type of nursing that you're doing, in terms of if you're on the floor, if you're, if you're in a small clinic, or if you're in a single physician office, or what kind, what sort of things are you doing? But in general, I would say absolutely. I mean, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what the needs of the patients are, what they're looking for. I think often nurses have a frustration that they don't get more credit that they do deserve a lot more credit in terms of their understanding of the patients. When we talk about patient care, the nurses are the front line. The doctor's in there for 10 minutes every day when he or she comes by. The nurses are the ones that are caring for these patients, particularly in the hospital, in an inpatient setting. These are the people these are the men and women who get to know these patients, who know what their stories are, who know what their complaints are, and these are the people that really make a difference, I think. So my short answer to the question would be absolutely.
Yep.
Ryan, what do you think?
I agree 1,000%. Right? You have to ask yourself, what is the goal of clinical experience? And I think too many students focus on the goal, because I see it when they write about it in their personal statement, is I understand medicine, right? I know what the doctor does. I I know that blah, blah, blah is key to being a good physician. In my mind, that's not the goal of clinical experience. The goal of clinical experience to me is, do you actually like being around a patient when they're
Yeah.
complaining to you and they're crying and they're pooping and they're peeing and they're like, and their family members are yelling at you and all the happy stuff, but all the sad stuff. And right, that's the goal. And being a nurse is amazing experience for that. And you've proven yourself as a nurse that this is what you want. And now all you're doing is you're saying, I love this. Now I want to have more impact on the patient. I want more knowledge so I can do more for the patient and actually be the one treating them. So in my mind, that's key. Now, a follow-up question that always comes from this is, as a nurse, do I still need to shadow? And I always go to yes, right? Shadowing is to understand a little bit more of the doctor world outside of the small amount of interaction that you have with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yay. All right. Pros and cons of the different curriculums medical school use. Ooh, this is a good one. So this is something I tell students. It's too many students focus on stats for picking medical schools. I'm like, how about let's look at curriculum and lots of other things, but curriculum is a big one. So I talk about it a lot. When I went to medical school, I didn't really understand all of the differences between curriculums and when I went to medical school, 15 years ago now, there probably wasn't as much diversity in curricula as there is now. And so I went to New York Medical College. I went to a school that had a very traditional curriculum. You would study all of the subjects independently from each other. So we started with histology, anatomy, physiology. We went to whatever each of the different sections were. So that's a very traditional curriculum. I would have done much better knowing what I know now. I would have done much better in what has become a more common type of curriculum is the systems-based curriculum where, okay, we're going to learn the cardiovascular system. And within the cardiovascular system block, we're going to learn the histology, the anatomy, the physiology, the pathophysiology, the pharmacology, everything related to the cardiovascular system. We're going to learn it all together because guess what? That's how the body works, all together. And instead of just it all being separate. And I think knowing how I like to learn, I would have done much better with that. So, so that's another one. So traditional systems-based, a flipped classroom is becoming more and more popular. It's not really a standalone curriculum, but it's just a learning style that schools are using where you do all of your learning at home. Right? We don't need the way that we have technology and everything else now, and this pandemic is proving that we can learn sitting at home. We don't need to sit in a classroom and have someone lecture to us to learn the material, but schools are using the flipped classroom to say, learn the material on your own, and we're going to spend classroom time not going over PowerPoints, but actually discussing further in depth and answering questions based on what you've already learned so that we can continue the conversation. So that's another way. Problem-based learning is something that University of Colorado School of Medicine uses a lot of, where it's 6 to 8 or however many students in a small group, usually using vignettes that the school creates so that students can figure things out, right? It's usually, as it said, problem-based. So there's a problem. Usually it's a clinical vignette of here's this patient presents with XYZ, and then you go through questions. What's the first thing you want to think about? What's the next thing you want to think about? Okay, you did a CT scan. Here's what it shows. Now what are you thinking about, right? And it's just going through this whole process. It's like watching like House MD or Grey's Anatomy or something, just in the classroom, and you're working through an episode. So, any other kind of structures?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think one of the questions is applicants have to ask of themselves is what is my learning style? How do I learn best? Am I an independent learner? Do I learn best by being on my own and really investing in stuff? Am I a learner that really does better in groups where I'm together with a group of other students and learning? as opposed to a more traditional style where the professor is up and sort of, this is the information and giving you the information. That's not as common anymore, but it still happens. And so I think that students really have to investigate on their own, kind of how do I really learn best, and where I need to find a school that really seems to match with that. But I think you've lined out the real majority of those sort of curricular patterns now that schools, and I think it's very rare these days for a medical school to have a very traditional sort of process. I mean, it's not as typical anymore that schools require attendance in class. You know, they're streaming those classes. They're storing them on servers so you can just watch them whenever. I knew students who would listen to the lectures while they were exercising at double time or time and a half the speed of the lecture. And so that they were really hearing it faster as they were going, and then they could stop it and back up if they knew something that they had missed or that they wanted to concentrate on or whatever. So there's a lot of different methods for students to be able to handle the curriculum in medical school these days. But I think knowing your own style and then clearly investigating what the curricular structures are at the schools that you're looking at or that you've interviewed at is really important. And just as you said, Ryan, I think that is really the key to finding a school that best matches you and fits you. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Good stuff. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at some of these.
The popcorn of our questions is at that stage where it's like pop.
And you got to take it out of the microwave or it's going to burn.
Right. So we had our flurry and it's pretty calm right now.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I saw you answer a question about this Khan Academy stuff. So
yeah,
Khan Academy, they didn't tweet. I don't think they specifically tweeted, but students found the webpage where Khan Academy had many products listed that they were getting rid of. And the MCAT material was on that list. And students, rightfully so, freaked out because it's like, this is a great resource for free, and you're taking it away from us. Khan Academy 2 days ago, as we're recording this on Monday the 15th, 2 days ago said, we hear you. We're going to extend. The initial expiration was like July something. It was like a month. We said, we hear you. We are going to extend to the end of September 2020 so that students taking the MCAT this cycle would still have access to the material. They then, a day ago, said, we hear you even more. We're going to extend to September of 2021. So thankfully, they're listening a little bit. I have lots of questions around why they're getting rid of their MCAT stuff. Is this a contractual thing with the AAMC? That the AAMC all along was going to pull this information into their paid products? Khan Academy has not said that stuff is staying on YouTube indefinitely. The AAMC has not said that the stuff will be available for free at all. So still lots of questions out there, but at least it's available through 2021.
Yeah, to me, one of the things that was most frustrating is we've had so many challenges around communication with the AAMC this year. And a lot of them have been the AAMC was reacting to a crisis, whether that's COVID or the riots or city curfews, and not thinking about we need to get out in front of it with the students. But this was obviously something that both Khan and the AAMC knew coming. And I feel like it's a real missed opportunity on the AAMC side that they could have been out in front of this one. The flip side is, I think pre-meds as a group reacted really positively. Like they were freaked, but they were so polite and constructive in the way they responded that in the course of 72 hours, you guys, the pre-med community collectively, changed their minds. And that's amazing. Like, I was so proud and happy when I saw that. Khan did say in that content update, and like you said, Ryan, it was totally buried. It was way deep down, like not even in their press releases, just like somewhere on their blog. They said our mission is now K through 14, and they are getting rid of a lot of test prep, including like their GMAT prep, not LSAT, as many have noted, but they also just started LSAT prep a year and a half ago. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's still mid-contract. But the thing that I wanted to make sure everybody noticed, as thrilled as I am that MCAT prep from Khan is staying up for another 15 months, is they have said they don't have the dollars to update it. And even when the MCAT isn't going through big official changes, it usually is going through small, subtle changes. And that's why, companies like Blueprint, formerly Next Step, update their material every single year. So just keep in mind that Khan, it's still wonderful. I still recommend it because you can't beat free. It may get a little bit out of date now because it's not getting the updates while they hold it free for everyone. So yeah, I think we have more questions to ask to find out what happens in September 2021.
Lots of questions. I immediately went to, and this is just where my mind goes. I don't know if you saw my tweet, Rachel. I said, somebody tell me, like, how much information is out there from Khan Academy, right? Kind of regardless, or not regardless, but kind of ignoring the questions and stuff like that would take a lot of resources to build appropriate questions and practice questions, etc. But the content specifically, right? How does a reduction reaction work, etc. I said, how much content is out there, and what would that look like if I hired, right, medical school headquarters hired underrepresented and disadvantaged students to make that content? So I'm helping the community by paying them, but then also helping the community by recreating or creating the content for them that can live forever. So I'm still trying to figure out that math. But I think
I wondered the same thing. That the first thing I thought was, well, a void just opened and someone needs to provide all this prep.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So stay tuned.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions come in? Let's see. In the flipped classroom, is it mostly learning from textbooks or videos? I don't think it depends. Depends on the resources from the school. I think technology is so just, and like Scott, 50 years ago, students had to go to Harvard to hear from the brightest mind in the field of psychology, right? Because that's where she taught. You had to go to Harvard to hear Professor Smith talk about psychology because that's just where she taught.
Right.
But now you go on YouTube and you can see all of her lectures. It's just
correct.
It's there. So the information, the knowledge, and I got so mad recently at a school, actually gave a cease and desist to a student. A medical school gave a cease and desist to a student who was selling her notes. So she made very pretty notes and put all the information nice in a structured way. And at least one of the professors found out about it and said, no, that's my knowledge. That's my IP. You can't sell that. I'm like, hey, like, you're not the only person who knows how a kidney works. Come on.
Right.
Oh, I got so mad. And this was a disadvantaged student who I had lots of other issues. And she was using this to help pay for a roof over her head and for food. But anyway, so random side tangent. Where you learn the information is kind of irrelevant. And it's interesting. A lot of students are getting very frustrated with medical schools because they're like, well, I'm paying all of this money for tuition, but all I do is stay home and use third-party test prep material to study for the boards. Like that's all I do. So material-wise, I think at the end of the day, for most students, luckily we're in a time right now where however you learn, there's material out there for you to learn from.
That's right. And I think if you're the kind of student that learns alone best, then you're right. There's a lot of material out there. There's a lot of videos. There's a lot of books. Everything is available. If you're the kind of student that learns best in a group setting where you can bounce things off of each other and share ideas and everything, then that's also very possible. And a lot of schools structurally set that up so that you're in groups and that you have small group settings and et cetera. And so, I think that the notion of the flipped classroom is not as much about the resources that you're using to learn the information. It is about where and when you're learning the information. It's flipping that. You're not learning it in the classroom. You're learning it at home, and then you're using it in the classroom to better understand it or whatever. And so that's why it's, the notion of flipping that is important.
Yep. One final question here that I think is always a popular one is the knowledge or the kind of the world of podiatry. And students oftentimes get letters from podiatrists or letters from nurses or letters from PAs. They put the shadowing hours of podiatrists and other kind of non-physician, even though podiatrists technically are physicians, in their application. So if you're on the admissions committee and you have a letter of recommendation from a podiatrist, what does that look like?
My honest feeling about that is it's going to vary depending on the individuals on the committee. And some of them would be, that's, patient-centered. The podiatrist is working with the patient. The student is watching or interacting with the patient. So sure, I get it. So there's going to be others who are going to say, oh no, that's not the same. It's, totally different or whatever. So I think it's a hit or a miss. I think my feeling would be that if you want to be really careful and safe, and you want a letter from a physician, don't get a podiatrist, get a MD or a DO. But if a podiatrist is all you've got, then sure, go for it. It's not, I don't think it's not going to be a negative necessarily. It may not be the kind of positive that you want or hope it can be, depending on, as I said, the various people on the admissions committee. For example, if you get an orthopedic surgeon, then, some orthopedic surgeons are like, no, podiatrists are, they're the enemy. And, we had a big debate here in Texas a number of years ago, and the courts in Texas were trying to decide how far up the leg can a podiatrist go in terms of treating a patient. And the orthopedic surgeons were up in arms, that, you can't go anywhere up the leg. It's, and so it's a big deal. And so it just depends a little bit on the particular people that are on the admissions committee and what their own sort of personal feeling is about stuff like that.
It's interesting that the student said that this podiatrist was on a medical school admissions board. I wonder if they were on a podiatric medical school admissions board. So you have to be careful, right? You have naturopathic physicians out there who go to medical school and on medical school admissions. So I would clarify. Now, one thing that AMCAS lets you do that TMDAS and ACOMAS don't let you do is send letters to individual schools. And so I love this little hack is if this podiatrist was literally on a medical school admissions board, the medical school that's your dream school or whatever, you can have the podiatrist write a letter specifically to that school to say, hey, University of Colorado, as you know, I was recently on your admissions board, and I'm very aware of the type of students that you want. And Sally here is the perfect fit for the school. She would be amazing there. Blah 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 blah. Right? Very specific to the school, and you can in AMCAS, you can designate that letter to only go to that one school.
Right. That's right.
So that's a fun little trick. I even do it for, if I would only do that for a podiatrist for the one school. For a physician who was previously on a board or currently on a board, maybe even, I would have them write 2 letters, one that's school specific and then one that's generic and designate to the school for the school specific one. It's a fun little trick I like to do.
Exactly.
That's
why, and the ability for AMCAS to do that is why they charge so much. Just saying.
Sure.
Just saying.
Sure. All right, another Ask the Dean in the books.
Yes.
Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely, Ryan and Rachel. Thank you for all your work, and
thank you for everyone watching, asking some great questions.
Yeah, keep it up, everybody out there, and it's good to see you all the time.
Yes. All right. And we'll keep you updated. As I had mentioned earlier at the start of Ask the Dean, this episode, we should be getting our hands on Mapped this week. Obviously not a final product or a releasable product, but once I can dig in, I'm going to definitely be doing some screen recordings and probably some screen sharing and Facebook Live and just to play around and show you guys. So I'm excited for that.
Sounds good.
Have a wonderful, wonderful night, and we'll see you next week here for another Ask the Dean.
Peace out.